terms of going back over witness statements, developing timelines, commissioning new forensic reports, we can work on what could be described as very well-educated guesses, hunches, trying to develop lines of inquiry and investigation that we can pass on to the CCRC. And this is obviously based on the good faith that they'll take us seriously and execute what we ask them to do in terms of investigation work. And this is a pretty gloomy picture, but a fortnight ago we had an unprecedented case conference with the CCRC directly for confidentiality reasons. I can't name the case, but the feedback we got on the report that we put forward to them in terms of investigation work we wanted them to do on that case was fantastic, and we're developing and honing and refining a sort of blueprint for applications and investigation work that we're going to be sending to them, and we hope that this is going to result in more cases being referred to the Court of Appeal.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you both very much indeed, and it's really wonderful the work you're doing. I'd like just to say 1 second about why I am involved in this. I started on this because of a man who's been in prison now for 26 years, and he was prosecuted on the basis of a confession which he signed after 48 hours alone without anybody in police custody, and at the end of that time, having been told that his alibi had changed her story because she'd been intimidated, he signed a confession. There would never be a prosecution today. There was no other evidence of any sort whatsoever. He's in prison now 26 years. And the other set of people whom I'm particularly concerned with is the Algerian allegedly terrorist suspects who don't even know the evidence against them. They have nothing to answer because it's all done in secret. And 1 or 2 have now been in prison 5, 6, 7 years as this incredible system in this wonderful free country. They don't even know. And they're going to be kept there, appeal, refuse, appeal, refuse, appeal, refuse, until they are willing to go back to Algeria, where 2 are already in prison, threatened with a trial in 4 years' time. And out there, the corruption of lawyers is absolutely normal. So the chances of being arrested and put in prison are immense. But that's the pressure on them. So I'm very concerned with this, and I'm very glad to have had this out today. We've got now over half an hour for questions and discussion. I'd be immensely grateful if you've got a question, you put it to one of the panel, not to the whole lot, or we'll be here all night. A short, precise one. If you've got a statement to make, I don't mind statements, please make it reasonably short. I know some people have offered specialist services and so on. But the idea is not to have the entire panel answering every question, and to get through as many comments and reflections as possible. I think we are all, in a way, suffering people. We're all here on behalf of others who are really being treated extremely badly and unjustly, and we want to share our experiences. So having said that, by way of a start, I'll try to take, in a fair order, anybody who wants to ask a question. Would you direct it, if it's a question, to one of the panel? There's a hand in the back there. There's a hand there. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Don Cargill. This is my colleague Nadia Penna. I've been horrified what I've heard all of today. We are fairly well known in the polygraph industry. I'm the chairman of the British Polygraph Association. You might be seeing us from Tricia Goddard's show on Channel 5 as well, who does the lie detection.
Could you just tell us what a polygraph is? I'm sorry.
A polygraph, our correct titles, respected grey-haired gentlemen, is forensic psychophysiologist. As you know, polygraph is now hopefully going to be admitted in court for the early release of sex offenders in this parliamentary term. My view is, therefore, people are wrongly convicted of the crimes, either out of prison or in prison still. We would like to make an offer from our company, NADAC, that we will polygraph any of your poor relatives or friends in prison with a free polygraph test to prove their innocence, and we'll do that gratefully.
Thank you very much indeed.
Could I respond? Just like to just respond briefly. Just wanted to first of all follow on from something that Joe said and I didn't think completed enough of. He said that the concept of innocence really is a bit of a red herring as far as trying to overturn a miscarriage of justice is concerned. And the thing about the meeting that we had with the CCRC was that I think they tried to appease us. They wanted us to believe that they truly are bothered about miscarriages of justice and injustices or innocence, whatever generic term we want to use. And they said that every box they open, they want it to be a miscarriage of justice. Every set of documents they start to look through, they're looking for the golden bullet which proves it's a miscarriage of justice.
Do you believe that?
I'm still talking about it and I'm going to say no. I think that I don't think it's possible to find what they're looking for, because the documents that they're looking at are documents that led to the conviction, and they have already lost in appeal. So I don't think it's possible to find what they're looking for in those documents, because even if they find evidence of factual innocence, if that evidence was available at the original trial, and it will be in those documents, it doesn't constitute grounds for referral. And what occurred to me is that we do take the presumption of innocence seriously in a way they don't. And what we do is we take cases on the basis that it is possible that the person may be innocent. We don't work on the basis that you are innocent, but what we'll do is we'll reserve judgment until such time we have put the evidence which led to your conviction under critical interrogation. And if we can show that to be unreliable in some of the ways that Allan Bayle has been talking about and Allan Jamieson, it means that we would restore to you the presumption of innocence until such time reliable evidence has been found which shows your guilt. So that's what I'd like to say in terms of that. With regard to the lie detector tests, my question would be, how reliable are they? And I know that there are many victims of wrongful imprisonment who've served decades in prison, who are still, they've been out for years, but they're still not regarded as innocent, even though they've overturned their convictions. And that's not even talking about Sue May, who's finding it difficult to overturn a conviction. And she is not innocent or not innocent determined by whether or not she can overturn her conviction through a successful appeal. She's either innocent or she isn't. But my concern about victims of miscarriage of justice who are prepared to take these tests is they're not foolproof, and they may end up being turned against them and being used as evidence of their guilt.
Thank you very much. We'll give you a chance to come back, sir, in a minute, but I'm going to ask somebody else to ask a question or make a comment. Anybody else like to make a contribution? There's a hand over there, lady there.
Hiding around the corner. Is it possible for spermatozoa to be transferred from a body, either secondary or tertiary?
Well, yes, because it must be, because that's what we get on this wall.
No, but I mean...
Can you take the mic? Give him the mic.
Oh, sorry. I know I'm a quiet chap. I'll take one of these. Can I apologise for eating a sausage roll? It's the only thing I've eaten since 5:30 this morning.
Oh, of course.
Back to spermatozoa. Does everybody know what a spermatozoa is, incidentally?
Yeah, we're grown up.
Good. Well, you're saying that. Almost anything. Here's the truth, which I hope we've been trying since I began. Science hasn't got all the answers. People keep asking us, could this happen, could that happen? The only way a scientist can tell you that is if they've done the experiment. So when you say, can sperm move from one place to another, anything can be transferred by contact from one thing to another. And the question is, how far along that process can it happen? So the real answer is probably, and the accurate answer is we don't know. That's not going to help you any, though, is it? Remember, though, and I remember speaking to crime writers as well about this, what's really important is what's possible. Right? And if something's possible, the next question is, does it introduce the doubt that everyone's looking for? So I think that the answer to that is we don't know, but I would guess, depending on the circumstances, that yes, it is possible. People didn't know how DNA could move. People didn't know how gunshot residue could move, hairs, fibres, all of that, until we did experimental work. But think about the number of opportunities there is to transfer material between all of you today. Right? You've all been in the same room. You've sat in seats, different seats, you've eaten, you've handled things. We'll find evidence of you all somewhere or another. but the question is, how did it get there?
Okay, thank you very much.
This is Michael of Aglio. I was convicted in 1967 for the murder of my friend Angus Sibbett. It was my trial. I was found guilty. I've had 2 appeals. I've been to the Law Lords in 1973 and the CCRC, even though they looked at a tremendous amount of evidence that proved my innocence. They said because it was all available, therefore is no fresh evidence, and they won't refer it to the criminal cases, to the appeal court. What many of us are concerned about, however, is that the CCRC operates under extremely strict rules, stricter than those applied under the Appeals Act of 1968, which allowed the Home Secretary to refer cases back to the Court of Appeal for general reconsideration, in which the strict test of new evidence did not apply, and it could be properly used to bring about a mini retrial. In my case, which dates back to 1967, all the exhibits and forensic evidence found in the murder scene, such as blood and fingerprints, which did not come from Angus, the murder victim, Stafford or myself, have been destroyed by the police, so there is no possibility of undertaking new tests such as DNA to find fresh evidence. I have been deprived of justice because of this destruction. Do you agree that the CCRC should be allowed to use this destruction as exceptional reasons under Section 13(2) of the 1995 Act to say that a case should again be returned to the appeal court? Anybody whose conviction dates from before the CCRC, like Tony Dickerson and myself, is faced with the same problem as I am.
Thank you very much for the statement. I'll give it to the panel. I'm sure many of us up here think the CCRC is not a contributor to justice, but a blockage on the way to justice. I'm afraid that's certainly my experience. But someone on the panel would like to say something about that. Alan, do you want to say something, Michael? And Michael.
I'll let somebody speak about the legal part, but could I re-emphasise something that I say, as I'm speaking as a scientist with none of the legal niceties. I have been involved in trials where, as a strategy, the lawyer has decided not to use evidence, and you heard me speak about the complexity of it or whatever. And this, again, underlines the point that you have to understand the evidence as well as the lawyer, and to see even introducing it as a statement so that at least it's there and can be referred. Because I know of a case where I told the lawyer that I'd consulted a blood pattern expert in the States who said this person could not have committed this murder, and they still, and I quote counsel, "I'm too far along this road now." I've remembered it to this day. Now, I know that person's currently doing life for a murder that we think, the blood pattern expert thinks there's evidence there that she couldn't have happened. So there is a general issue about strategies in cases and what constitutes new evidence. But to look at the other side, you can see the lawyer's problem and the legal system's problem, because if lawyers then, as a tactic, don't lead the evidence that they might not need, so that you've got the gap for the appeal, then that could lead to a whole lot of spurious appeals as well. There's very rarely in these things completely one side and the other. That's why I say I'm not here representing one cause or the other. I do a lot of work with the CCRC, and I think they probably their caseworkers have the same attitude as I do. When I open up a report, I'm trying to think how I can destroy it and find the hole in it. So somebody telling they're impartial, they're not doing their job, actually. Because if you're partial, you're more likely to do it. The scientific approach is to try and destroy the hypothesis, to try and destroy the story. And the more tests that it stands up to, the more likely it is to be correct. So somebody might want to take up your specific legal issue, Sarah. Just talk about the
Thank you very much,
evidence.
I don't know if this is much help to you, Michael, but one of the things that we often forget is when the CCRC was actually created, notwithstanding the fact that most people believed that it was being set up to address the wrongful conviction of the innocent, it was never established that. I mean, you quote 13(2), Joe was quoting Section 17 powers. It's the statute that's the problem that determines what the CCRC can and cannot do. I've heard people talking about there are better case review managers at the CCRC, that certain people will try harder. Well, they may do, and certain people might be nice and certain people might not be nice. It's the same in any walk of life, any job. But I think the real problem with the CCRC is the statute that set it up. And given that it was set up off the back of the Birmingham 6 case and the Guildford 4 case, cases where the public crisis of confidence around those cases wasn't that they wanted those men to overturn those convictions on technicalities. There was a belief in their factual innocence. But the body that we got, as you've rightly said, doesn't actually look at that in a serious way. And that's why we've set the Innocence projects up. If the CCRC could send those cases, I could probably go and get something more interesting to do with my life.
But Michael, isn't it also true that CCRC is so underfunded and understaffed that they can take years, 2 or 3 years, before it even gets near the Court of Appeal, even if it's approved?
Oh, so, absolutely. I mean, yeah, in a meritorious case, it can take 4 or 5 years, sometimes 10 years.
I'd like to ask Michael something on the last point he made about Section 17 of the Criminal Appeal Act of 1995. Do you agree with me, Michael, that given you've just said there was a problem with the Act itself, that there was a limitation in Section 17 with regard to the order that can be made for documents to be preserved, because it only applies to public bodies, doesn't it? To go back to something Kevin McMahon said this morning in the workshop that I attended, and I'm very glad I've come today. I'm actually a solicitor. I've been involved in a case for 11 and a half years, the Rettendon murders. Michael Steele, Jack Worm was the Rettendon too. I was the solicitor at the police station. One of the things that has occurred during that case, actually, is that documents have miraculously disappeared that we believe would have been able to have assisted us. And notwithstanding the fact that we're now in the best position we've ever been in right now, things like solicitors' firms involved, the Commission themselves have no formal power to order a firm of solicitors to retain those documents because a firm of solicitors is not a public body. Would you agree with that, Michael?
Yeah. Andrew Green has written about this. Sorry, Andrew. Made you startled you then. Well, one of the problems is that we've got this inquisitorial, investigatory body right at the end of the whole process. What we want is a proper investigatory body with the kind of powers which is independent. I'm not saying that the CCRC is independent. It's quasi-independent. But we need that at the start. Yeah. Because if you get to making an application to the CCRC, you're probably, you know, on average, 5 or more years since you were convicted. And one of the problems with that is, one of the things that Andrew's written about is, when the CCRC, and they do this in the interests of fairness and justice, if they get a complaint that perhaps a police force may have acted improperly in any way in the investigation, they think it's fair, according to Dr. Green, to notify that police station that there's been a complaint made against them. And what it's potentially doing, I'm not making any allegation here, is giving them an opportunity to cover that up or to lose it before Section 17 is even put into operation. And one of the problems is that you just don't know how much stuff is not being disclosed by public bodies, let alone all of the bodies that fall outside of that. So it's a bit of a lip service, really.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll move on to somebody else. There's a hand down there. There's a woman there with a...
mine's to Allan. Sorry. I'd like to...
A good-looking
both,
one.
But, I want to know if an O-secretor and an A-secretor, can they mask? And an A-secretor,
yep.
Like it came up in my son's case, and the expert said, because my son was an O-secretor and the other was an A-secretor, it can mask.
Yeah, you don't really see the O, basically. So you would see the A, but not the O. Are you following this?
No.
I think this is something we should take up, because everybody else is going, A? O? So, but speak to me after this, because I think for the floor, maybe the general... Can I, since I've got the floor... How many people feel their case depended on forensic science? A few? Oh, you're not sure? Because I'll tell you why I'm asking the question. Because it is my opinion that most of the people who are doing defence science are ex-FSS, people who have been trained in the same way and have the same thought processes as when they were working for the Crown, and there is not enough challenge there, and I don't know how many people felt that their defence scientist, if you like, did a thorough enough job on them, because I know how much stuff is landing on my desk from people like you, and I'm looking at the Defence Force, and this is the problem with the new evidence, because actually it was there, the message, the interpretation was there, it's just no one saw it. The signs were there, nobody saw it.
That's right. That's right.
If there's to be regulation, I would want to know who's to be regulated, because not all of the science that you see in court is done by the FSS or LGC. The range of expertise a lawyer might have to depend on. I had to look for a helicopter pilot. Are we going to get CRFP registered helicopter pilots? We've got a radiologist. There's a whole range of expertise that's in use. So the first is, who's going to be registered? Second, who's going to decide the standards? And I'll tell you right now, there are no standards. And until those are fixed and agreed, not by the forensic science community, but by people like the Royal Societies and the established scientific professional bodies, I do not want a priesthood created from the forensic scientists that are currently practicing, because all you will do is codify the bad practice that's currently there. And unfortunately, that's the road the government are thinking of going along, is to support the practice that's already there. You look at the code of practice for the CRFP, tell me in there where it tells you any standard. A scientist, a standard means I will measure this plus or minus this degree of accuracy for alcohol, for example. Those standards, remember you speak to somebody who was the chair of the standards committee, they are not there. So do not at the moment be promoting regulation and registration for scientists until you know what standards you're going to apply to that regulation. Secondly, how does that reflect? At the moment, at least you have the opportunity to challenge it, which is why I'm a supporter of the adversarial system, and also why I'm against regulation and creation of this priesthood. I've already said that I've given evidence in a whole range of things. The forensic science community would try to prevent me from doing that.
There's a gentleman just behind in a white shirt. Then I'll come to Barbara.
Yes, I would like to fully support...
Who are you speaking? Who is your question to, sir?
Michael Naughton.
Fine.
I would just like to pass a comment that I absolutely support what Michael Naughton. I'm against the adversarial system. The system needs overhauling in its entirety and splayed more towards a inquisitorial system. So I've lost my point now, I've been waiting so long.
I think you've made it, you support me.
Yes, but we need a more inquisitorial system, and this was promoted by Michael Mansfield QC in his book Presumed Guilty, and I recommend anybody read that. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, Allan raises the point that he's for the adversarial system because it gives you an opportunity to contest charges which are made against you. This is what he said. My own point would be that in theory I would be for the adversarial system because it puts you in some kind of control. The problem is, in practice, that from a kind of production of knowledge perspective, what you've got is you've got investigatory bodies, all of the investigatory authorities and resources are with the police and the prosecution. So from a sociological perspective, all of the knowledge which is produced, which goes towards making a charge in a prosecution, is biased towards finding someone guilty of a crime. And what you do then, and Joe gave a particular example of one of the cases that we're working on, is that what defence lawyers do then is they have to work within the agenda set by the prosecution. And what you've got to do is you've got to try and contest forms of knowledge, forms of evidence which have been produced against you. And defence lawyers can't do that. What you need is defence lawyers who have the same resources and same investigatory powers which can do it from a presumption of innocence and contest properly.
Okay, thank you. Barbara, Barbara's next there.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd just like to ask the students, confronted with all this forensic talk and DNA talk, my experience is that a lot of the cases where there's a wrongful conviction, the forensic may not have been used to convict them, but there's certainly enough to prove that somebody else did it. Is that something that you would look at when you're looking at people's cases? Would you attempt to find the real murderer in order to prove that the person you're representing is innocent?
Well, I think from an Innocence Project perspective, because what we are looking for is evidence that can indicate innocence. So if you've got forensic evidence or any kind of other evidence that proves that someone else did it, so obviously that person, the case that we're working on, isn't the real perpetrator of the crime. So, yeah, of course we'll take a case like that, I think. What do you think?
Do you want to join in?
Yeah, no, I don't really have too much to add to that.
Speak up.
In one of the cases in particular we've dealt with, this issue has arisen. What we've done in terms of passing on information, for example, to the CCRC, is that we will hand on anything that we find out regarding a particular name, because that is evidence that the Court of Appeal will regard as, let's say it's fresh evidence, it's admissible, yeah, and we'll deal with it.
Okay. Well, you've had a go. I'll see if anybody else wants to. The gentleman behind you. Don't mind.
Yes, thank you. Can I ask Mr. Bayle if you have any problem getting hold of the original forensic information, like fingerprints and other?
Yes. And when I find that, and I said in my lecture that getting evidence from police officers, especially, I mean, I'm getting a bad reputation at the moment, but when I go to a police force and say, I want to see this particular evidence, we should see the ducking and diving that's going on. You know, and in the end, I'll go and seek a decent lawyer, and I'll go back to my lecture again. You've got to find a decent lawyer and say, come on, let's have the evidence, let's go and get it, and they'll get a court order or whatever. You've got to fight, and I'll be with you if I'm fighting for some evidence, and I want to see it. So don't worry about that. But you're right. If you're trying to find evidence on a murder or whatever, and that police force is ducking and diving, well, I want to let go, because I'll just go in there. So it's his hard, but you can get it.
Can you use the mic?
Yes. Over the last 10 years, has there been a significant advance in fingerprinting technology to mean that evidence that was gained 10 years ago could be looked at in a different light now?
Okay, I'm what they call a forensic radiologist. I didn't explain that, did I? Oh. How long have we got? Oh, okay. I'll go further than the normal expert. I will look at the location of the pores, the sides of the ridges. I will see which way the patterns are going, which way the ridges are going, which way they're pointing or whatever. So I'll go a lot deeper, which may help Susan in her case and whatever. So I do go a lot deeper. The big problem with that is I'm one of the few in the country that actually do it. And I'm finding now that the training places in the UK are not actually teaching what I do. So I've actually written a manual on forensic radiology, and I actually work with the Americans and the Canadians. In this country, it's awful. They haven't got a clue. It has gone on, but say, going back to my original lecture and whatever, there's lack of training. And they're identifying people now on 6 and 8 points, which, I mean, I've found some wrong idents already by various bureaus. So there are a lot of problems out there, but they can be overhauled.
Well, enough. How would we go about getting involved with the Innocence Project in terms of our case?
How would we go about getting involved in the Innocence Project in this case, Paul's case?
I'll answer you, but I wanted to answer Sue, because Sue talks about hope, and I think that it's really important, especially for people who are, you know, in a sense, hopeless, not only in terms of trying to get their cases back to the Court of Appeal with the system, but they've lost hope. But I just want to state there's a lot of talk about Innocence Projects. Allan Bayle's working with Innocence Project, Allan Jamieson. But the Innocence Projects would not have been set up in this country without Innocent, Andrew Green, UAI. I've been working with them for 10 years, and we're just trying to fill a gap in terms of the resources we've got with the students. So I just want to say that hope is also provided as I think is it Paul? Yeah, Paul? Yeah. Paul said earlier about the hope that the family get from getting support and being part of, you know, UAI and Mojo and Innocent and South Wales and all the rest of it. So we are part of that, and, you know, we're getting a lot of publicity at the moment. But I get a bit embarrassed that we wouldn't exist without what those guys were doing, because they inspired me. So I'd just like to say that. The other thing is, get the leaflet, send an email, you'll get sent a questionnaire, and then just, you know, petition them? I mean, where is your case based? All right. So there are some London Innocence projects now, and that's just how you do it. Just make an application and fill in a questionnaire.
I'd like to thank the organisers of this meeting, and I know an awful lot of work's gone into it. I'd like, on your behalf, to thank the speakers of the meeting. I find it very encouraging to come together. We all got different problems, and we're sharing them. Very helpful. So could you please give a little round of applause to all those before Kevin... Thank you all. And Kevin, I think, is going to wind up the meeting.
Thank you very much, Bruce, and I obviously echo that. Thank you very much to all the speakers, and of course, thank you for attending this meeting. Now, what is obvious that people are at different stages with their cases. Some have been working on them for many, many years. Some find themselves in this position only very recently. But what United Against Injustice is about is bringing together people to hear this knowledge. If you heard that message once, you can't hear it often enough, to empower you to take control of your own cases. Now, every time I go to a meeting, I always, without doubt, learn something new. And for some people, it's a floodgate of knowledge and information that's occurred today. I realise that. But within this room, there is such an enormous amount of knowledge, of which, in the short time we've been here, we have only scratched the surface. So when you go away from here, don't think, well, that's the end of the meeting. There'll be a little bit of networking amongst you now before we go, and we're all going on. Where are we going to, Bruce? You know the venue.
Oh, the Wetherspoons, the pub. Oh, yeah, sure. I thought you were going to church. The Wetherspoons is just down Kingsway. 5 minutes away.
The Wetherspoons down Kingsway. It's where we'll continue these discussions when we leave the hall here today. But please do take the opportunity of the time you've got left to network and get those last-minute questions in. Sometimes, obviously, when you go to these meetings, you go out with more questions than answers. That's just the nature of things. But it's been a tremendous meeting. It certainly has been for me, and I'm sure it has been for everyone here. So I just want to thank you all again very much for attending, and thank those speakers. Just one final point is, as you know, it's free to come in. And of course, that's what our meetings are always free. But it does cost a little bit of money, and we have some collection buckets on the way out, and we would hope that you would spare a few shillings to put in them, and they'll be there at the door. Okay, so thank you very much.
This annual meeting was financed personally by the members of United Against Injustice. For those who have received a free copy of this DVD, please make a donation of £5 or more if you can to the address below. Thank you. Your donations will be appreciated.